All right, so for anybody watching, I'm sorry this is going to be really boring for you. Okay, so this is the chop saw. Right, so they call it the chop saw. It's the short name is chop saw. Chop saw refers to any saw that has a circular blade that goes like this. Right, so this is a much more complicated version of a chop saw. This one is you guys ready for it? Are you ready for all the words? Can you hear me? Okay. Sliding compound miter saw. Okay. Sliding, it slides back and forth. It's a miter saw, meaning that it can cut at an angle. And this particular one is a compound miter saw because it can cut at this angle, and it can also cut at this angle. For the most part, the compound miter part you won't ever use. It's not solely for it, but it's mostly for molding. Because crown molding isn't flat, crown molding is at an angle, and so you have to cut it at an angle, and it makes, you have to use a compound angle to cut it to fit next to the rest of it. Also useful in handrails, because handrails are coming down and then they turn, so this angle into this angle isn't just a miter, you have to cut it at an angle on an angle to get it to match up right. For the most part, this tool is used at 90 degrees, which on this reads as 0, right? The math on this is a little goofy. Well, you'll get to it eventually, but basically you're doing subtractive math, right? So this is saying that it's cutting at 0, which means that when I cut, I'm going to get a 90-degree angle. So if I need an 89-degree angle, I have to put this to 1 degree, right? So it's the inverse of 90 degrees. So if I need a 23.5-degree cut, which is really skinny, I would have to go all the way to, impossible on the saw, but 66.5, depending on my math. Okay, so the angle on here is the inverse of the angle that you're cutting, the angle that you will get. All right, so a couple things. This is a two-handed tool, or this tool can be used with either hand, so you can use it with your right hand or your left hand. You want to stand on the opposite side of the tool, right? So if I'm using my left hand, I want to stand on the right side. If I'm using my right hand, I want to stand on the left side. The thing you want to avoid with almost every single tool is crossing yourself. You never want the tool to go towards a part of your body, right? So same with your legs. Like whenever you're using a tool, you don't want your legs to be one in front of the other. So that way, if you have to step back, you don't trip yourself in the process. You want to adopt this kind of power stance is what they call it, where your feet are shoulder width apart. It's the exercise stance, right? If you're about to lift weights, if you're about to do something, you stand like this. All right, so if I'm using my right hand to use the tool, I'm going to put my left hand on the material, pull the trigger. I'm just going to demonstrate and then we'll talk about it. Go ahead and lock that sliding feature. All right, so you put your left hand on the material, you make sure your fingers aren't underneath it, and you want to make sure that it's all the way up against the fence and all the way down. All right, so you don't want to start it kind of off the fence because when the saw turns on, it will push it up against it, and you have a potential to pinch your finger and you'll get a bad cut. Same thing is you never want your fingers underneath it because the saw will pinch you. All right, it won't kill you or chop off your fingers or anything, but it hurts. So you want to make sure it's firm, it's down, cut. You will notice right here there is a line that says don't put your hand here. You really don't need to get your hand this close to the saw. If your hand is this close, you need to put a clamp on here that holds the wood down. And then you get your hand out of the way and then chop. Right? There's just no reason to put your fingers at that kind of harm. This tool with the sliding function will cut a board that is 10 inches thick. When you are not cutting a large board, you want to, the locking mechanism is a little wheel that is right here. You want to lock the wheel, and that makes it so that it doesn't slide. So if you're cutting small things, 2x4, 1x4, 2x2, you just don't need it. But if you are ever cutting something that is really long, like this board, for instance, which is actually too long to cut on this board, the saw, you want to pull it all the way towards you, cut down, and then push away. With all the tools, you want to maintain maximum control. So you never want to put the tool in a position where it's going to run away from you. Right? So almost every single tool is designed to push towards you. Right? So the saw blade cuts so that it's pushing against you instead of pulling you into it. Right? And so you want to try to keep that as much as possible with whatever you're doing. So pull it out, turn it on, push it away. Make sense? So I'm going to lock this because you guys are just going to use this piece of 2x2 as our demonstration piece. Let me grab the disinfectant spray and I'll wipe this off before you guys use it. I don't know where Harper and Michaela are. You guys got the Canvas notification, right? Or did you guys just show up for class? Did you see the Canvas announcement that said that you were supposed to be here at 9:30, not at, okay. All right, who's up first? Earplugs in. Reese, can you go grab one of those black trash cans that's over there by the sink? Yep. So you're going to grab a piece of 2x2 over there, and you're just going to cut it at, cut a little bit off the end of it. Sure. Thank you. I'm going to stick this over here. All right. Go for it. Throw that piece away and then give me another cut. Don't cut too much off because everybody else is going to cut it too. Sweet. Yep. All right, who's next? Reese? You're up. Give me another cut. Sweet. All right, Shemani, you're up. With a soft wood like this, you can probably cut a little bit faster. But that speed that you had is probably what you're going to want for really nice cuts, or if you're ever doing like delicate or really nice woods. Because the faster you go through a cut, the worse the cut's going to be. Right? So if you just jam through it, you're going to get lots of splinters. But if you go nice and smooth, it's going to be a better cut. And you have to just kind of figure out how much time you have versus what you're working on. Right? If it's a stud wall that's going underneath the set that nobody's going to see, it doesn't matter how nice of a cut it is. But if it's cabinetry or it's something that's audience facing or that the actors are going to touch, it needs to be nice. All right. So one thing that I wanted just to demonstrate, because I realized I didn't show you, the reason we don't cross ourselves, so I don't want to hold here and chop here. You can see that my arm is in the way. And something to remember with all of these tools is you want to pay attention to your body. Right? You want to pay attention to where your fingers are. You want to pay attention to where your arms are. You don't want to let the rest of the world distract you. The reason people get hurt is they do this, and then somebody talks, and they're answering, and then they cut. Right? And this is how you get hurt. You're cutting while not paying attention to the saw. Woodworking is a very zen process because you have to focus exactly on what you're doing. Right? And zen in the way that like you are solely focused on this thing, so you have to push the rest of the world outside of your mind. Because if you don't, you're going to hurt yourself. Which, talking to my wife, it drives her crazy because she doesn't get that in her job. But there's lots of times where it's like, my sole focus is follow the line, follow the line. Oh, I got off the line. Okay, follow the line, follow the line. And that's your thought process for 20 minutes as you're cutting a piece of wood is, my jigsaw has to stay on the line. It has to stay on the line. It has to stay on the line. Oh, I veered to the right. I need to veer to the left. All right, stay on the line. All right, so you have to have that level of focus and concentration on what you're doing so that you don't cut your finger off. All right, so next we're going to talk about the bandsaw. Turn this around. All right, so in my opinion, the bandsaw is the most dangerous tool in the shop. And it is the most dangerous tool in the shop because it is, what's the word I'm looking for? It seems safe, right? So people don't give it the respect that it needs, right? So people don't treat it as though it is a dangerous tool because it's very easy to use, it seems safe, and this is the tool that I've seen the most people get themselves hurt on. So, it is called a bandsaw. You can see right now, well enough. Because the entire blade is one band. So open up the bottom. So this is one continuous blade that, if I'm not mistaken, is 11 feet long. Right? And it is constantly cutting in the downward position. Right? So the wheel always spins this way, which means that the blade is always going down. It doesn't go back and forth. It's always constantly down. And if you look, you can see that the teeth have a downward angle to them. So, bandsaw safety. Similar to most other tools, you want to pay attention to your fingers, you want to pay attention to your appendages, you want to make sure that you are operating in a safe location, right? You don't want the ground to be dusty, you don't want things that you're kind of standing on top of. You want to make sure that you are being safe and taken care of. All right. So, this tool does a good job at making moderate curves. So you can't do really tight curves with this tool, but you can do curves about as big as this. Right? So this isn't a kind of tool where you want to do lettering, where you have to like make the bottom of the V, but you can get a nice gentle curve with a tool like this. The thing that you have to remember is that the blade doesn't turn. Right? The blade is stationary. So you have to turn into the blade. So if you're doing a curve, you can't just turn the wood. You have to kind of drive the wood into a curve. Does that make sense? It's kind of like turning in your car. You can't just turn the steering wheel and turn. You have to go forward and turn at the same time. Same thing with a piece of wood, right? So you can't just like come in here and be like, I want to turn. You have to drive into the turn. So this is called the throat. You want the throat to be as low as you can be. Theoretically, it should be just taller than your material. This is designed for bigger pieces, so this is as small as it gets. But if you're cutting something, if I was resawing this piece of wood, needs to be, right? I would want this just barely taller than this piece of wood. It makes it so that it's a better cut, a straighter cut, and less likely for you to hurt yourself. So lower this back down. Why is that grabbing onto that saw blade so bad? There we go. Okay. So, couple things. On switch, off switch. This tool doesn't have an automatic brake, so when you turn it off, it doesn't just stop itself. It will keep running for about 5 minutes. This is the brake pedal, so you have to push down the brake pedal and it applies pressure to the wheel on the bottom and actually makes it stop. It is your responsibility as someone using a tool to make sure that the tool is safe for the next person. So when you are done cutting, it is your responsibility to clean off the surface, make sure that the tool is stopped. On something like the chop saw, make sure that the chop saw is set back to 0 degrees. Make sure that it's ready for the next person so that you don't screw up their work. All right, so let's use it. When using this tool, remember where your appendages are. The accident that happens the most is people cut off the tips of their thumbs. Right? So when you're using it, you don't want to adopt this handset. You want your thumb to be directly behind your index finger. So when you're pushing a piece of wood, you want to hold it like this instead of like this. Does that make sense? So that way, if you slip, because you're most likely not going to cut off your index finger, you know where the end of your index finger is, but your thumb is kind of just out there. And people misjudge where the end of their thumb is. And you never want to get yourself into the position where if the piece of wood slips through it faster than you anticipate, that you cut yourself. All right, so as you're cutting, you always want to make sure your hand is to the side, never in front of the blade. Because that will happen sometimes where there's a void in the piece of wood and it cuts faster than the rest of the piece of wood. So you can be cutting and pushing really, really hard, and then all of a sudden it just goes really fast. You always want to make sure your hands aren't in a position where if that happens, you cut yourself. So let's turn it on. I'm going to make some cuts, and you guys are going to make some cuts. Want to make sure it's all the way down. Make sure the tool gets up to speed. You can kind of hear when it's at its top speed. So you can see kind of nice, gentle curve. Pull your sleeves up for me. Go ahead and turn it off. Go ahead and stop it. Push the brake. Cool. All right, who's next? All right, Reese. That's yours. You can keep that. Yep, go ahead. Okay. Hermione, yep. It's a good curve. Okay, and last but not least for today, we are going to use an air compressor. So you guys can take your earplugs out. This part's not so loud. I'm coming back over to you. So I demonstrated this in the video, but it's important for you to do it yourself because it is awkward. Get a little more spray. So, did you all watch the videos? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. An admission of defeat. I'm sorry I posted them late, but so do you remember which tool this is? What? This is one of the pneumatics, but this is not the stapler. It's got the long, skinny ones that go on the side. What? The brad nailer. Okay. So, what you want to do, you want to hold it in your hand with these 3 fingers, pull the coupler back, take the tool, push it together, and then let go. One problem people have is they tend to try to push with their fingers, and so they go like this. Oh, that actually worked for me. So you have to hold this coupler back until the bearings get past this ridge, and that's what gives you the lock. Okay? So I'm going to hand these to you, and you're each going to try it. And I'll do a quick sanitation between each one. Yeah, push a little harder. There you go. Yeah, let's actually put some staples in it, or brads in it so you can fire it. Just hang tight. Okay, remember how to pull it back, how to open it? And then these just sit inside of it and close it. Okay, go ahead and just put it on the board and shoot a couple of brads in. That's it. Okay, go ahead and disconnect. This feels ridiculous. But it's important to be safe. Pull back further. There you go. And now let go of the coupler, but not the hose. There you go. That's it. Give it a couple of shots. So you have to push down and then pull the trigger. So push it against the wood, now pull trigger. That's it. Disconnect. Beautiful. Take those first. Wunderbar. Theoretically, we've got enough time to do one more tool. So I want to show you guys the drill. We went over them in the video, but it's worth repeating, mostly because not everybody's done it. So this is the drill. You can watch the video on all the features. But specifically, I wanted to show you the chuck and how the chuck works. So you turn it, if you're looking at the back of it, you turn it clockwise, and that releases the chuck. So you can see the little teeth in there that get closer or further apart. So you do that, it loosens it, put your bit in there, tighten it, and then you can hear that ratcheting. That's it tightening on top of it. You can use the tool to just kind of loosen and tighten. At the very end, you never want to hold on to it and pull the trigger because that wears down your motor. You want to let go of the trigger and just ratchet it by hand. So the other one, the impact, which I thought I had one out here, but I don't know where it is. Here it is. So impacts are tricky. They're awesome. They work really well. But they're very, very fast is the biggest problem. So when it's going top speed, it's going typically a lot faster than you need it to go. It's a variable speed trigger, meaning the less that I pull it, the slower it goes. And you don't have to pull it all of the way, right? So you can just kind of like barely pull the trigger and get good spin on it. But to get the bit out of here, you pull the collet forward, take the bit out, push the collet forward, put the bit in. This will only accept tips that look like this, right? So I can't take that drill bit out and put it in this impact, but I can take this out and put it in that drill. Does that make sense? All right. Any questions? This makes sense? You guys know how to do this now? When you take the battery off, pull this thing, takes the battery off, make sure it clips all the way in for the battery to go on. Yes. Not every drill is going to work the same. So for instance, we have a couple of rigid tools, and they've got buttons on the side. DeWalt makes one where the battery comes down versus slides in. Every make is going to be slightly different. Even the Makitas, depending on which generation you buy, the battery works a little bit differently. But for the most part, they clip in now. All right, so I think that's it for class. You guys finished 5 minutes early because we're missing 2 of our 5 people that are supposed to be in this group. So Tuesday, we're going to do the same process, but a couple different tools. And then you all need to make sure that you're working on your design for your name project. So look through the syllabus, look at the rubric, look at the assignments, the test. What is that? Test number 3 for the carpentry project. Look at it, start sending me designs on what you think you want it to look like, and then you're going to have to figure out when you're going to do some shop time to work on your project. Cool? Thanks, everybody.